so I've asked him to come with us and talk to us tonight a little bit about the importance of test-driven development in agile teams and engineering practices. And because he happened to have been involved in just a tiny little event almost 20 years ago, we're going to talk a little bit about what the heck is this Agile Manifesto thing anyway. Okay, but that's kind of the after effect, because I want us to focus on the importance of testing and engineering practices. And just so you guys know, this meetup is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a little bit kind of like a 60 minutes interview. So it's going to be James and I going back and forth. We're going to have a conversation, but you guys are more than welcome to throw questions inside of the chat. The VAs will be helping us out, sending us questions in, and maybe, James, we can try to field some of the questions in flight.
Of course, sure.
Okay, awesome. But we'll definitely leave some Q&A time at the very end for everybody's questions. So without further ado, I want to introduce you, James. James, tell them a little bit about your background.
Well, let's see. I kind of have a couple of pictures here to help describe it, but let me just rearrange them here. So I'm from Illinois, and this would be what I'd normally be dealing with right now, except my wife and I, we've got a long history of being in Florida. Illinois, I'm near Chicago, but now we live in Bonita Springs, and that beast was in my backyard last year. You guys, everybody knows about those down here, of course. So it's, of course, those are all around out here. I wrote this book, Test-Driven Development for Embedded C. I like to play pool. There's my pool table back there. My company, Wingman Software, that's my logo. I'll show you why that's my logo, because in World War II, my father was a fighter pilot, and behind me is some aviation art, which is has a famous guy in the front plane, and my dad was his wingman on D-Day in World War II. And after my dad died a few years ago, I thought something I could do to honor him would be to name my company after him. And so Wingman Software, it's a really good metaphor for what I do as well, which is oftentimes I'm in the wing position with the programmer who's trying to go kill some problem, and I'm helping them do it. So it's a good metaphor. Let's see what else is back here. Okay. So anyway, and then I got invited to go to Snowbird by my friend Bob Martin, Uncle Bob, and well, behind me there's a lift there. Of course, Snowbird means skiing, and so I was totally in for that reason. And then it turned out there was some kind of interesting stuff that happened while we were there. But so that's a little bit about me. I usually travel a lot, although I have not been on an airplane probably in a year now. I mean, except for going back to Chicago to see the family. But usually there'd be 100,000 miles flown every year. And then last year was about 15. So a little different change of life. That's okay.
Cool. Okay, so thank you, James, for that little bit of an introduction about yourself. You'll probably tell us a little bit more as time goes by. So I kind of want to kick this off because this is this is an agile group, and one of the things that a lot of people talk about is the squishy stuff, stories, individuals and interactions, and stuff. And quite often what gets lost in the whole mishmash of agility is this importance of having sound, development practices. I'm gonna speak strictly of software. We can generalize later, but speaking strictly of software, having sound, engineering practices and a mindset of engineering. So, can you tell us a little bit about that from your perspective of the importance of engineering and that mindset?
Okay, so let's see. I'm looking at the attendee participants panel. And do you people have a raise your hand button that you can press? If you do, if you're a developer, programmer, engineer, can you push that button? Let's see who's here. I don't see any. I'll push the button.
God. Okay, a few.
I don't see
Few of
any.
it. Four. We got four so far.
What's wrong with my view here? Okay, I'm not seeing them, but
Yeah,
okay.
we
So
had-
so Marcelo, you're the meeting chair, so you get to see them.
Yeah, we had 4 people raise their
All
hand.
right. Okay. So I'll just show you the rest of my shirt. Programmer, and let's see. Someone who solves a problem you didn't know you had in a way you don't understand. So aside from 4 people there, the rest of you are kind of going, yeah, that's right. What are they doing? You know, why does it take so long? Why couldn't they? I just asked for something small. Why does it take so long? All right. So one of my little kind of pet peeves with what's happened to Agile is that there's been a lot of popularity on the management side and not much popularity on the engineering side. Let's say adoption on the management side and not so much adoption on the engineering side. And why is that? And I think it's because you people aren't bringing the engineers along. Okay, I'm going to blame you, of course. When we started teaching people extreme programming, and I got into Agile via the extreme programming route, I've got a couple of pictures here that I can put behind me. Well, that's not it, but that is. Right, so I was learning about extreme programming from these fine people. And the way we taught extreme programming is we started out on day 1 with engineers and showing them how to do test-driven development. And by the time they got to Thursday and we introduced planning, they said, big deal. Yeah, planning, that's easy. Let's go do it. We did also experiment with teaching them planning first. And we were lost. Nobody could figure out, you know, you're asking someone to estimate something when they've never done incremental and iterative engineering. And so they were kind of, well, we're not sure what to do. So I can't, that's going to take me 2 months to do that. It's like, well, when we started to break work apart and see the engineering work to be done in small pieces. When we reversed the way that we adopted Agile with our training class, we got much better results. So what happens to me now if somebody contacts me about they want their team to learn Agile, I'll say, sure, that'd be great. I'll help you. And I tell them the story of the order they should learn it. And then we start with engineering and then we bring in management. And now it turns out, you know, lots of times the momentum is coming the other way. But so that's part of, you know, I think your responsibility in management is to help the engineers know that, hey, we're doing this iterative planning. And so there is also iterative engineering. What can we do about that? You know, how do we learn about that? And I've got a picture here that kind of describes my perspective. Well, it's kind of what I've experienced. So this is the Agile pain scale. Now, I don't know if how your organizations are, but I've looked at a lot of articles online, and engineers are pretty negative about Agile. And as I read why they're negative about it, what I discover is that they feel like they're being micromanaged. Now they got to report every day, and you know, so they're not supposed to report every day. They're supposed to work out problems together every day. But the motions are, I'm being micromanaged, right? And so now, once they know how to do the iterative engineering, where is that? Over here. Yeah, okay. Then they're cool. They're happy. But anyway, so that is, I think, kind of one of the things I see in the world of helping companies transform. One other thing I'll mention, because, well, I'm an engineer. So as an engineer, I think it's all about engineering. And I was out with some people one night. Let's see if I've got this other picture. It's kind of pertinent to the question that you asked me. This isn't it, but it's going to be the next one. I'll just say, I'll lead in the topic first. I was out to dinner with some people. And of course, it was after a conference, not of course, but it was after a conference. And we got to talking about Agile, of course. That was the of course part. And I said, yeah, you know, most of the world's just doing the easy half of Agile. And the person I was talking to said, oh, yeah, what's the hard half? I said, the technical side, the technical practices. And he goes, That's not the hard half. The hard half is the people half. And with that, I said, oh no, there's 3 halves, because really it's so true. The easy half is the rules of Scrum or SAFe. That's the easy half. Dealing with helping people change and helping them do meaningful change, that's the hard half. And so, right, it's not just planning and executing, it's also respecting people. And that was kind of a surprising thing for me, because I'm an engineer. It's like, could we just start doing some engineering and not worry about this other stuff? But oh, you know, I didn't have this behind me when I was saying about that. So anyway, that's I don't know if I answered your question, Marcelo.
Well, you know, just like any true interviewee, answers begat questions, because, you know, a few years ago, you threw at me this phrase that Agile is summable into this one statement, and I've unfortunately inflicted it probably upon everybody who's visiting this meetup, which was that
Oops, you cut out.
talk to each other, people. Okay, and now you've bestowed me with this Agile has 3 halves, and honestly, I don't know what it is you've begotten here, but now my head is going in a gazillion different directions.
Well, Marcelo, you've said talk to each other, people, way more times than I have, so you can claim that as your own now.
Well, I appreciate that, but I still got to give you props there, James, because it really is the gift that's kind of keeps on giving. But you know, wow, you really have hit me with this 3 halves thing. So the thing is, though, when you guys were meeting and you were talking about, you know, making work more lightweight, what was it about the way that we did work before that needed to be lightweightified, if you will, when you're, from your perspective, what would be your point of view on that?
Yeah, okay, so I got a prop for this again too. In the 90s, now I can see through some of the people here, you were around in the 90s. And for us in software development in the 90s, one of the things that we paid attention to was Watts Humphreys. And part of Watts' message, I think we misunderstood it a little bit, but at least what most of us were getting. Can you hear that vacuum cleaner, by the way? Yes?
Very little.
I can. So if you guys would say you do, then I'll go see if I can get it shut off. So please nod. Okay, I'll be right back.
Well, we're fine now. It's not as loud. Just me.
Kind of a hum, but that's cool. Hey, this is part of being agile, Rick. Stuff happens, right? I mean, what else could happen?
Let's see how quick he resolves his issue. Okay, that was quick. Okay.
That's fast cycle time. That's fast cycle time. I gotta tell you, you know.
I don't know. You went back, so that means you didn't have, you know.
Went back, yeah. So one of the things I'll tell you is that if you were back in the 90s and you were in the software development world and you didn't read that book, you were kind of lost. That book takes me back, James. That book really takes me back.
You guys are good. You guys carried on. Okay, so and then Marcelo, I guess I could ask you, was the message anything like if we had a better process, the people wouldn't matter so much?
I kind of got the sense from that, you know, having come
maybe
from
not as
IBM
much as
background,
I did. Okay.
Yeah, having come back from an IBM background, I kind of got where he was coming from. You know, I'm not sure that everybody got it.
Yeah, so there was a lot of if there was a better process, the people wouldn't matter so much. And I went to Motorola. Oops, wrong button. I've done a lot of work with, is there any Motorola people here today? Sometimes they go to these things. Okay, so we went to Motorola in about 2005, and the VP that we were talking to about helping them adopt extreme programming, they told us programming is not a skill we care about. It's not an important skill. What we're going to do in the suburbs of Chicago is the high value design work, and what we're going to send to places where we can get it done cheaper. We're going to send the designs over to places we can get it done cheaper, and then we're going to save a lot of money and be able to work 24 hours a day, right? And this is what they were thinking is, plug replaceable programmers, right? If they just had better processes, it wouldn't really matter. They weren't looking at, now I got a feeling that I don't have this exactly right, but this was what it felt like, right? Was that we were, and then we're still suffering, so the thing at the Agile Manifesto meeting was processes were getting bigger. RUP was an important thing, if anybody remembers Rational Unified Process. So IBM, Marcelo, you were probably there. IBM's buying all the intellectual property from people that were building design tools and object-oriented notations and things like that. And so IBM bought the guys that did that, and they created UML, and then they started inventing tools to generate code. And so they were trying to, they were making processes bigger. And so part of what we were going to Snowbird about was to talk about not having processes be bigger. It wasn't a meeting called Agile. It was the Lightweight Methods Summit. And now you're probably all very happy that the name has been changed, because who wants to be known as a lightweight? That's one of our, Agile jokes. But yeah, you don't want to be known as a lightweight. So one of the, so Ward Cunningham said, we need a new name. Who wants to be known as a lightweight? So that was pretty good. And the thing, I brought this old paper up here, this old website up here, because the the first point there is kind of surprising. I was surprised because I'm an engineer. I was there because of extreme programming and what I thought was a superior way to work. And I still am involved in that process. I do appreciate that the people side is so critical. But at that meeting, what most people were talking about is the people. Process was a secondary thing. If you had really good people that could work together well, and that's where the respect for people thing comes from. If they could work together well, then they could achieve wonderful things, right? And so that was what that conversation was. And so it's kind of surprising to me that the conversation was about people. Have any of you seen this sculpture before?
No.
It used to be in the square in Boca. So not far from where some of you live, I'm sure. And I thought, oh, I'm going to use this. I can use that in a conference talk someday. So I did a 360 around and taking pictures. As people do when they go traveling, huh, Rick? You're thinking about work and you find excuses to go and
Yeah. So let me shift the conversation back to our engineering talk. So do you feel that after the manifesto came out that maybe some of the focus on we need people who are engineers who care about the quality, about the outcome of what they're building, and focusing on and doing a quality job? Do you feel that maybe lost its way a little bit? And is there anything that you think that first of all, do you think we've found our way back from that, or do you think we're still kind of stuck these days in the squishy part of Agile, if you will?
Well, as a homework assignment, go contact the Scrum Alliance and have them give you the numbers on the number of certified Scrum Masters, and then have them give you the numbers on the number of certified Scrum developers, and you can answer that question yourself. Not to be a wise guy, but you're going to be probably looking at 1 million plus certified Scrum Masters, and you're going to be looking at, if it even is 100,000, I'll be surprised. Maybe it's 100,000, maybe not. I mean, it isn't a popular thing. It isn't a thing, right? So unfortunately, it's not. So after the manifesto, so let's just go 10 years after the manifesto, because it seemed to me that a lot of interesting stuff was happening. I thought there was a lot of innovation in Agile for those 10 years. And extreme programming was still part of it, though the business people were taking over by then, right? And, so we got a lot of business people here, so it's good, right? Because it's spread the word, okay? Now, there's still a lot of the same problems, right, that were happening originally, so they look maybe different now, but so I think the people that started with extreme programming stuck with it, and I'm one of them. And one of the things about that is if a way of working lasts 20 years, pretty much unchanged, the core didn't change, it expanded. Today, a lot of it's called DevOps, right? So now that's a big important thing. The automation of the end of the thing. What's not automated is the beginning of the thing, right? The engineering side, the iterative and incremental.
Yeah.
I'm speaking too broadly. I'm generalizing, but generally it's true that more people are not doing effective incremental engineering, and and so how's DevOps going to work out for you?
Right.
Some things are going to go bad.
Yeah, so that makes me think of the whole metaphor of where stuff flows, right? Stuff flows downhill.
Yeah.
So with respect to that, what do you think that we as a community should do to promote that stuff up front? Where could we be helping our developers refocus? For those of us that are quote unquote non-engineers, where could we be doing to help them focus so that, yeah, if you're using DevOps, but if you're giving me crummy stuff, DevOps isn't going to fix crummy stuff.
Yeah.
What do you think we could be helping our developers? Well, what should we be focusing on as a community?
Well, I think there's obviously an awareness aspect of it, and part of why I like to be talk to a group of people that are mostly on the business side. I like to do that because there's an awareness often of what are we missing. Our engineers already say they have enough, but they still complain about being micromanaged. I don't know, do any of your engineers complain about being micromanaged? I don't know. I just know when I read people in the open internet, and there's a couple of posts I've seen where compared to a balanced view of what Agile should be, and I guess I should know what it should be, right? So my article on it, next to somebody saying a core question, same core question, 2 answers, and my answer about, well, you people that don't like it actually aren't doing it, and then all the people that don't like it are complaining about something that isn't really Agile. And so there's an awareness thing here. Now, maybe Agile needed to be rebranded as DevOps, and maybe there'll be pull now with this, I'm just making stuff up here, but if there's a demand for more frequent releases, maybe engineering is going to have to get their house in order, right, to be able to support that, right? How many embarrassments will we need, right, to make us, join the crew? Now, I've got a couple of other things I would just, so I was mentioning that engineers feel micromanaged after the business person goes off to Scrum Master training, and then they come back and start wanting an everyday meeting and asking people to do sprints. And I did appreciate, Rick, you mocking sprinting on your walk up the hill, up the mountain. So thank you. I'm hoping I helped you become aware of that poor choice of words. I don't know, because I know you've heard this from me before. Some things, I'm still on this thing. And they wonder, when you overload people, why it doesn't turn out so well. And, but another reason why code quality matters, and engineers, we should take notice, there are high profile problems out there, and the lawyers will be coming. No doubt the lawyers will eventually come and find us. Things like unintended acceleration in Toyota, things like, the 737 MAX. It wasn't really a software problem, it was a system problem, but still the same kind of things. The lawyers are going to get interested. And you say, oh, we don't build a product where it's got a liability. Oh, but maybe you have to write the website that gives away $1 billion. And that's not great. All these glitches, it really bothers me when I see the word glitch in a news story. Because as soon as you read it and you find out it's a bug, not a glitch. I mean, a glitch would be an unexplained natural phenomenon that we don't understand yet. And pretty much we understand when we screw up with bugs. So now this is not my photo from Florida, but the blood's in the water. Eventually we're going to start getting sued. I'm just saying. And before the government decides to lead us around by the nose, we should get our act in order. Right? That's
well, now that you mentioned this subject, that's always kind of concerned me is when we don't focus on promoting more sound engineering practices up front. How much money are we tossing out the window? For example, we take a budget, from your experience, how much of that percentage of the budget went into, correcting things because we didn't apply sound engineering practices and test-driven development up front? I mean, I'm really asking you just to take a shot in the dark, but your experience is as good as anybody. So,
so I'll answer it. I'll answer it with how one of my clients once answered it, because usually that question gets tossed out there as the unanswerable question. But I was at Motorola and they are like insane about the way they collect data. At least they were at the time. And as soon as that question got answered, one of the guys said, well, if we have a bug, it costs 6 weeks of engineering time, on average. So they actually had a number for that. Now, so a bug, 6 weeks of engineering time, that's not cheap. There's probably a lot more expensive ones. Take something, I like to tell the story of the Microsoft Zune. Did any of you own a Zune?
Oh my God.
Of course not. I mean, what was a competitor of the iPod, right? So Microsoft had to come up with something to be a competitive product, and no one ever had one. I've had of the people I've asked that question, I've maybe had less than 10 over the last 10 years answer that question affirmatively. And I've been asking you about it since early 2009, because at the end of 2008, there was a defect in the Zune, which caused it to not work on the last day of a leap year. Okay, it just warmed up your last day of a leap year. You mean New Year's Eve? Kind of an important day for a music player, wouldn't you think? Category 1 defect for a music player, and it didn't work. So tarnishing of a reputation. Their website said, just wait till January 1st and it'll work fine again. Charged it back up. It's like, okay, but still they got a black eye. And guys like me are still talking about it 13 years later. Kind of fun. But I mean, fun for me, not for them.
Yeah.
But, so it's important. Quality is important. I don't know how to put a number on it, but how much time, so you all know your teams are saying, oh yeah, we're almost ready with this feature. We've got to find a few more bugs. Does that get said fairly often in your organization? Right? I've got a couple of graphics for that, of course. So I thought, wasn't this billed as a fireside chat? I think on one of our emails, you said we were going to have a fireside chat. And so when I think of fireside chat, I think of, we're putting out the fire in the code. But maybe you had a different fireside chat in mind, maybe just a nice little warm one like this.
Yeah, I don't know, but from this group, when they come up and I hear them talk about some of the things that are happening to them, it's definitely that last picture, definitely not this chestnuts roasting on an open fire picture.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So this is like, okay, we just
a question.
Steady fire. We could kind of get used to that and justify it.
Yeah. A singe versus a blow up.
Okay, let's see. I've got a little something to show you here, and just kind of to relate that. So you're iterating. sprinting, or maybe there's Kanban people here, right? Let me open up this other picture here. And let me just kind of describe a phenomenon that seems to happen. So here's these iterations. And if you save tests till the end, or if you're relying on a manual testing activity, what happens at the end of these iterations? Now, I know there used to be something, I think it was in SAFe, called the hardening sprint. Is that still part of the SAFe definition, anybody? I can understand, I'm not sure if it is or not. So I'm going
These guys
to,
are
I just
usually
remember.
talkative still, talkative group, and yes, I believe it's still a thing that can happen.
Yeah, okay, so when you're in transition, you're probably going to need that, because before your processes are under control, making changes is going to have unintended consequences. And so, wrong button. If you're saving tests till the end, you can see some little fires happening there. And if those fires happen to go out during the time allotted, be put out during the time allotted, everything's good. But then somebody says, oh yeah, we got one more bug. And that's when, burned my head, singed my hair on that one. And now it's like, oh no, that one last bug just turned into a big problem. And why does it happen? Why does this happen? And I contend it's because of how we work. It's because we do tests after we do development. We're not working in a controlled process. And part of the extreme programming practices, test-driven development being at the core of that, being what I help people learn, is test-driven development. It helps us discover the problems that we're putting in as we put them in, right? So if you're coding for 5 minutes, you made at least 5 mistakes. I'm just saying that you're going to have to, be it a typo, be it a logic error, be it putting something in the wrong place. Okay, programming is meticulous and easy to get things wrong. And so, could you work in a feedback loop? And that's what test-driven development's about. And as an awareness, there's articles on my website. I'd be happy to provide some links that you guys could post afterwards. And let me see if I can find the story. Your teams, if they're not doing test-driven development, are doing debug later programming. Now, of course, that name's a joke, because nobody's going to put, oh yes, I'm a debug later programmer on their resume, right? So I made this term up when I was writing my book, because I needed kind of a shorthand to compare the two. And so, tongue-in-cheek, totally, debug later programming. What happens when a programmer is programming? They make a mistake. All right, now they make a mistake, but kind of like a tree falling in the forest and no one is there, does it make a sound? The philosophical question. If a mistake is made in the code and no one knows it's there, is it a bug? And I will contend, no, it's not a bug yet. Okay, when someone discovers it, now it's bug. Okay, now maybe it was discovered by the person who put it in which case, okay, that would be the natural order of things. If I wrote the code this morning and I'm testing the code this afternoon, and I discover it, no big deal. It's not really a bug yet. It was just a mistake I found that day. But if a tester, a customer, somebody later finds it, discovers the bug, now we got to go find it. All right. Now, the longer the time from when it was introduced to when you get to fix it, the longer it is, probably the harder it is going to be able to find. So some of you work at big companies with old code bases. What if it's a problem in code that's been in production for 20 years? And where's the expertise for that? Usually long gone. I work in, with embedded and things that go inside of telecom networks and things. That code can be extremely old, and the expertise is long gone. So it's like, stay away, don't touch it. How long does it take to find the bug? Well, you've asked your developers, when will you fix that bug? What did they say? We don't know. We'll tell you when we find it. So we're living with this risk of potential small mistake holding up millions of dollars of revenue from a release, penalty, whatever it is, whatever your business is, some lost revenue. So what does a defect cost you? Okay, now Motorola knew what it cost them in man hours. What did it cost them in reputation and sales and things like that? That's a different story, right? So what did it cost the Microsoft to put out the second Zune rather than the first Zune and have it be buggy? Probably wasn't a good thing. Now, fixing the problem could be trivial, but then if you fix a problem, guess what happens when you kill a bug? Other bugs come to its funeral. And, so lots of times code works by accident, where if you imagine so you're close to programmers. So if you got a piece of code wrong, that it was supposed to say yes when it should have said no, and then some other piece of code that's asking this a question, and when it says yes, it's supposed to do A, but when it says no, it says B, but they got that wrong too. Now, the feature worked because two things were wrong. When you fix this bug, you break this feature, right? So offsetting defects, right? So systems can work by accident. And when next time your developers fix a bug and they break something else, you just say, you had offsetting defects. Your code works by accident. Wouldn't you like your code to work on purpose? I heard about this thing called test-driven development, where your code actually, when you start to adopt this practice, your code actually works on purpose. Wouldn't that be a good idea for us? So, I mean, you got to do it good-natured, of course, too. Not like being such a jerk like I'm being. But how is test-driven different? I could offer right now, too. So, Edgar Dijkstra, you might not know this person, but he's a famous computer scientist. A lot of the things that we kind of take for granted today were things that he was a pioneer of. And he mentions here, if you want more effective programmers, they should not waste their time debugging. They should not introduce bugs to start with. And unfortunately, he didn't tell us what to do about it. Should I share my screen here so you guys can see that better? I'm seeing some people squinting.
We're seeing that. We can
you can see it good enough?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. If you haven't come alive with my voice, then you'll be able to see it. Let's see if I can find the slide about. So extreme programming practices, there's a number of things that people in extreme programming do, one of which is test-driven development, which is really the heart of the improvement in this small step problem solving. And if you think about metaphorically what it's like at the end of the waterfall, or at the end of a set of iterations where there isn't automated testing preceding it, you're under pressure to meet the date, right? And your options are totally gone, and there's not much you can do about it. Now, if you were doing test-driven development, things kind of flow. So I heard the words Kanban earlier. Too bad Kanban didn't come before Scrum. And if Kanban had become the popular thing, that's kind of unfortunate, I think, because I think Kanban has this idea of let's do serious problem solving. And so if what we're doing is, if our work is being halted by defects, what should we do about that? I know Scrum says do a retrospective and then figure it out. But we asked Ken Schwaber in the first ever Scrum Master training class, because he did it at our company back in 2003. We asked him, why don't you tell people to use the extreme programming practices? Like, I shouldn't be telling people what to do. I'm telling them to do a retrospective, and when they do the retrospective, they're going to then decide to go and do the extreme programming practices. I said, no, they won't. They won't know about them. It's like, okay, well, so what if instead of a waterfall with the pressure at the end, we had kind of a steady stream of working code being developed, working features being developed, right? And so how's that going to happen? Well, one of the things we have to fight is a natural tendency of engineers to make mistakes, programmers to make mistakes, super detailed work. And so we have to, somebody just came in our front door, so you'll have to make do with that. My wife's trying to move past the front door. At any rate. So you make a mistake, just like before, okay? People make mistakes. But guess what? The mistake gets put right in your face, right? Right in your face, like this coronavirus. At any rate, that's my coronavirus that I've captured. So it puts a mistake right in your face. And what does that mean? where it came from. It's the work you just did in the last 2 minutes. That's what caused it. So I should be able to fix it. Unless, of course, your new test passes. This is when people get hooked on test-driven development, extreme programming. Your new test passes. Oh, good, I got my new code to work. But 10 other tests fail. It's like, oh, shoot, I might not have noticed that for a while. I didn't remember that unintended consequence of the change I'm about to make. Okay, so feedback loop, a control system, right? The reason that we get these products that work so well is because they're manufactured with process control, right? They build stuff and they build quality in. Why does software not work so well? Because we don't have that same rigor in our invention process, unfortunately. I think hardware has the same problem, but by the time you mass deploy a product, you've got to have, your a lot of automation and such goes into the creation of something like this, so that the human element, gets removed, before they start grinding them out. So let's see. All right, so
this conversation for the last 10 or so minutes is just given me so much to think about with regards to unintended consequences and the things that we as Scrum Masters, as product owners, ought to be giving some mind to support developers in being able to deal with these unintended consequences earlier, because for me that just feels like it's more agile. I don't know about you, James, but that just like feels more agile to me, being able to deal with unintended consequences earlier.
Certainly, I mean,
and let me ask you this question, and this is just a it sounds like a kind of sales.
I might have to go. Wait, I got to go to my headphones here.
The people showing up. Yeah, boy, Rick, we have just had any slew of hits tonight. Let me tell you, but we're being agile and inspecting and adapting. Awesome, James. Okay, you here with it?
I'm not adapted yet.
Uh-huh. Okay, he's just displaying the value of transparency, folks.
See here. Did somebody say something?
Testing, yeah. 1, 2, 3.
Okay. Yep, we're back.
Okay, and we're back. And so, okay. Yeah. So my next question was going to be is in cases where we as product owners and Scrum Masters want to do this to deal with these unintended consequences, is training in these engineering practices something that we should be putting at the forefront of our product plans and our budgets?
Well, this of course will sound self-serving, but these skills are kind of hard to learn, and actually on the outset, just hearing about them, they sound like a stupid thing to do and like it's going to take us too much time. But actually, when you actually take the time to learn it, you find out it makes you go faster. That's why after 20 years, I didn't stop doing it. It helps me go faster. It helps me not have to do that thing that I don't like to do, chasing bugs, having to deal with the firefight, right? And I'd rather not have to do those things. And this gives me, I don't have to do it as much. I still do, okay, but not as much anymore.
So I did a slightly different question because I've encountered this. I'm curious what your experience was. I mean, have you encountered these sorts of circumstances where organizations that are metrics happy have these sorts of metrics, like besides the number of stories closed, they also throw in these metrics of the number of defects quashed or defects fixed? What do you think about that?
Can you hold on 1 second? We're gonna have an interrupt here.
Okay.
Because this couch behind me is getting sold. So,
oh boy.
Be right back.
Okay, that I think is a first, Rick.
That
We've actually sold furniture in one of these meetups. and stuff. So while we're waiting for James to come back, I'm going to put the question back to everybody. Has anybody encountered this sorts of thing where your organization is so metrics happy that besides, hey, how many stories have we closed? They generate this metric for, okay, also tell me how many defects you've closed too.
Yes.
What's your experience with that?
I've had that experience, and I explained to people, those two that you just finished mentioning are there so that we cannot collaborate and work together as a team. If I'm counting that, I'm focusing on the wrong thing. And I'm waiting too long to find a bug. So as soon as we get rid of this and we rethink how we collaborate and pair together, that's when we're going to start maturing and getting better at what we're doing. That will be the first step.
Wow. Wow. And Matt, I know you're on mute, but you shared with us that you had developers that refused to log defects, so their metrics didn't look bad.
Yes.
I'm kind of curious what that ended up having as an effect to your product. You want to share with us a little bit of experience with that?
I mean, Trainwreck comes to mind. So the short story is the developers made the QA person vet with them what she was going to log as a defect. And if the developer didn't approve of that defect, she wasn't allowed to document it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's absurd.
Funny, I had a different situation once where I had a team of about 5 people at a company, large company, and I brought a QA person in from my consulting company, and she was told that if she didn't log at least 10 defects in the first week, that they would get rid of her.
Wow.
Wow. So what you missed there, James, while you were gone, is we were kind of
Hi, Adrian.
over the. I'm
Hey,
sorry.
Dan. Long time no see.
Yeah, no kidding. Where are you? I don't see you.
I'm here.
Okay.
So what we were going over, James, while where you were selling that wonderful couch, was we were kind of recounting different folks, their experiences, this whole situation of metricifying defects, you know. And so that was the question before you had to step away, was like, what has your experience been in organizations where instead of incentivizing, let's build it better sooner, they incentivize metricifying defects? Tell us a little about your experience with that.
Well, you got to remember, I haven't had a real job in a long time, so I don't have much to offer there. I did see at my friends at Motorola some interesting dysfunction where we were helping them learn test-driven development and test automation. And when they went to one of their critical design reviews and they had to review their metrics, their metrics said, you didn't find enough defects, because when they killed mistakes with TDD, they didn't record those as defects because they were still in process, right? And so they didn't escape the development stage. And so they got to the stage of, getting it ready to go into system integration tests. And the engineers said, we were rejected because we didn't find enough defects. We were sent back to find more defects.
Wow.
So that was kind of funny. Now that I've told that story, there's another story that just, from a friend of mine, works for a big oil exploration company. And they were early adopters of test-driven development and in embedded. And so these guys were on top of their game. And they were building these systems that would basically do an ultrasound of Mother Earth with thousands of sensors all talking to each other on radio. And they're using TDD from the start, and they didn't have a bug list. And a few years after I got to know this guy, he was up for principal engineer with this company. And he said, would you mind, part of the principal engineer track is to get a recommendation from somebody outside the company. Would you write a recommendation for me? I said, sure. And so I wrote a letter of recommendation and said, so-and-so was so effective that they didn't have a bug list. And my recommendation was rejected because it's company policy to have a bug list. And so I had to rewrite the letter and say, they had a bug list, but there were no bugs on it. It's like, oh, okay, now.
This page intentionally left blank.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Wow.
That was pretty funny.
Got a question for you, James.
Yeah.
So in general, would you, in test-driven development, would you incorporate that into each sprint so that a test is developed as the sprint goes along, so that you kind of, when you get the code that runs, you have the code that tests it?
Yeah, I'll show you a picture. It's actually more extreme than that, because actually what we're talking about is extreme programming. So there's some code that doesn't exist. All right. And I think of something that code must do, and the code doesn't exist, but I write a test for the code that doesn't exist. And of course, my build is now broken because the code doesn't exist and I'm trying to test. So I do enough work to allow the code to be built. I write the code a little bit, a shell of the code, and watch it fail the test. And then I do a very small change to allow it to pass the test, maybe by hard coding a return result or something. If you have a programming background, if you don't, some of these words won't make sense. And then you think of another test. So it isn't like we incorporate it in the sprint, or we do a sprint afterwards to do the testing. Testing happens just in time, at least at the unit level, just in time the code is written, right before the code is written. So it is a iterative process, a control process, right, to see, to problem solve, right? So I wish my code did this. Okay, let's write a test that shows the code doesn't do that. If it happens to already do that, that'll be interesting. We didn't know that worked. I guess we're done. But that doesn't happen that often. So you write a test and then make it pass. And so that's what this cycle is here. And you might do this 20 times in an hour, right? So after an hour, you might write 20 tests. So it is and then there's other forms of these tests. I don't know if I have a graphic for it, but when people get good at doing unit tests, they'll get creative at writing higher level tests. So there's this concept called the testing pyramid. I don't think I have a diagram of it, but it's shaped like a pyramid here. Let me change my picture so I can do a little air drawing. So you've got this pyramid. At the base are the unit tests. And at the middle of the pyramid would be integration tests that tell you if features work. And typically business people will be involved in reviewing that behavior at that level. And at the very peak, it's like the real tests that involve real UIs and everything, but that's a small number up there and a large number of tests at the bottom. If you want thoroughly tested, reliable code, you follow these practices. Now, who wants that? So nobody bothers to do it. But I mean, some people do bother, but Adrian included.
So you're implying that you really start with the test as kind of the target, because that test will have to pass in the end once the code gets developed.
Right. Yeah. And because the fact of the matter is, Ray, that people have existing code and existing products, there's nothing you can do about that. We want to keep our business alive, so we're going to be incrementally applying this technique to the existing code. So if I want to make a change to existing code, one of the costs of doing business, which I could choose to just do it the way I always did with manual tests, or if I want a more sustainable future, I choose to start to add tests as I'm evolving code. So cost of doing business, if I had a feature that had no tests, changing that feature would involve writing some tests for the existing feature, and then writing the test that says the new feature doesn't work. Okay, but first I've got the tests around saying what it currently does, and then I add this new thing that says, well, it doesn't do the new thing you want, and then you make that change, and now all those things keep working. Have you ever asked for a feature and the developers give you the new feature and they broke 5 other things? Like they think it's okay to break the old stuff if they give you something new, and no, that's not usually okay. But so this is kind of the work ethic and the where you want to go kind of as an engineering organization matures, they're going to want, well, I hope they want to keep improving the quality as they go, rather than keep growing the mess.
So it's sort of like a pre-plan, you're pre-planning to write regression test for some part of the functionality that exists, and then you're going to add new functionality. And then confirm.
For an existing code base, you would choose when you're going to, and it's usually when you get drawn to an area. So it's a pragmatic approach. All these things in extreme programming are extremely pragmatic. We're being drawn to a feature for a business need, right? We're going to change it because the customer wants something else. Okay, so because we don't want to have collateral damage, if you will, when we add new feature A, we break B, C, and D. We don't want that. Existing features B, C, and D, we don't want to break those. So we write some tests for B, C, and D to make sure that we know what they do and what that code does, and then we bring in the new feature. Once we're sure that once we've done some, I can't say sure because all this is extremely complicated. Software development is extremely complicated. So we want to better our chance of not breaking some important feature when we make a change to something. All right.
And so how do you incorporate that into kind of the sprint sort of mindset? If it's kind of like you want this functionality that you're going to need for what the request, the ask is to be developed, and so you're going to tell the requester that, hey, we're going to develop these tests first to verify we won't have regressions, and then we're going to develop what you're asking for. Is that generally your technique, or?
Well, there's another technique. Is just So Ray, are you on the business side?
More on the technical side.
Technical side. Okay. So when somebody comes and says, well, how long is it going to take you, Ray, to do this? You say, it's going to take me X. And then they'll say, I need it sooner. And you'll say, well, really X is what it's going to take. And I'm not really that sure about X because there's uncertainty here, but it's part of my doing business and trying to maintain the quality of our code quality of our product over a long period of time, is that we need to do these things. So, one of the techniques is don't tell anybody, just do it, because you as a developer, let's just say you go to the trouble of learning about this and learning how to do it, and now you actually believe it in yourself that you've experienced for yourself that it helps you go faster. You don't ask permission. Right? So we're not hired because the business people know how to code better than us. We're hired because we might know something about what we're doing, right? And so what I'd encourage you to do is learn about it, find a kind of a safe way to learn. Maybe I don't know about your organization, but find ways to learn about it, and then as you learn about it, you're going to be able to advise your organization as to what would be the best course to follow. Sometimes you might choose to not write tests. I do this on my own website. Some certain areas I don't write tests for, some areas I do. I'm going to probably pay the price for that one of these days soon. But sometimes, usually I'll take the time to make the change with tests, and sometimes I don't, and usually I'm sorry when I don't. But not just sorry for being apologetic and feeling like I did the wrong thing. Sorry because it hurts me later.
And
right?
one of the things that folks could do is just go check out Wingman software, right? I mean, you've got a ton of resources on there to learn.
I do, but so my actually, if the technology that you're developing doesn't happen to involve C and C++, then I'm not the right guy. Although I know everybody, I could steer you to the right guy or to the right gal or the right persons. And
So James, we've been talking about test-driven development for a long time. Like, why aren't these companies getting it? Like, what is the biggest, complaint that they get?
Took my question, Rick. Took my question, but that's okay. I love you anyway.
Why wouldn't it come? Because developers don't know what it is, I would say. I don't know. Adrian, I would invite you. I mean, you're with a lot of, in a coaching role, you're with people a lot. And what's the...
And I'm chomping at a bit actually.
Yeah. Okay.
To
Come on.
address this, and
60-minute, the 60-second tidbit. Give it to us, Adrian.
a lot of it is just a misunderstanding of it. And one of the things, when I learned how to do test-driven development, and then later on behavior-driven development, which I'd like to talk about at some point during this conversation, but in test-driven development, the way I learned it was on my first project in Agile. I was a developer, and we were pair programming. And the way I learned test-driven development was by pairing with somebody who knew test-driven development. And he would look at me, his name was Kerman, from some Russian or Soviet satellite, Kyrgyzstan or something. Anyway, Kerman would look at me, and he would look me right in the eye, and he'd say, how about we write a test? And I said, all right. So we wrote a test. And that's the way I cut my teeth on test-driven development. And then later on using Cucumber with behavior-driven development. But I have not left that space in even the software that I develop on my own.
Oops, you went into
unit test.
spaceman mode there for a minute.
I think you broke up. I am trying to be cautious of time because
Yeah.
we did say that
So,
7:30 was Marcelo.
yeah,
go
it's
ahead.
our end time. Yeah. So there was one more
How to
topic
do it.
that I wanted to get.
And it was covered, sort of.
It's breaking up.
Adrian, you're
Go
kind of
ahead.
breaking up. Let's come back to that in a second, because there is one more thing that I wanted to see if we could cover with James. Before
Yeah,
we go
so
back to
Ray,
the-
Adrian, just know, you kind of lost everybody because your phone or something, or your connection went bad for a little bit. But
Oops, and there he goes. He
There you
dropped
go.
off. Oh boy, he'll come
Yeah,
back. I know
he'll
Adrian.
come
He'll
back.
come back.
Okay.
He's
Hopefully
coming
he'll come
back, but yeah.
He's a good
so-
guy, and he lives in Southern Florida, I think. So
Yeah.
at least he used to.
Yeah. So there is one more topic that I wanted to
Yeah,
talk
I'm here.
about. We could go on about test-driven development for a long time, especially with a few engineers. How many engineers are you talking about at TDD? Just two, because they can go on for hours. But there is one more topic that I wanted to talk to you about. It's been 20 years in a couple of weeks, James. If you were going to project over for the next 20 years, what do you think we as Agile practitioners could focus on to make the world of work better? It could be TDD, but what do you think we could be doing differently or better to help find better ways? What are your thoughts on that question?
I don't know. So there's the three halves of Agile. If we did all three of those, that would help.
Yeah, which would be great. If I know that we're recording this sort of stuff, but if you could give us a snapshot of that, of the three halves of Agile, because a few people in the chat were asking about, hey, can you repeat the three halves of Agile?
Sure. Let me just bring up my prop here, and I'll get off to the side a little bit. So the easy thing, the easy half of Agile, in this story about the three halves of Agile, which I told earlier, which was, I thought there were two, and then somebody reminded me that people aspect is the other half, the third half. That's what makes Agile so hard, because there's three halves. It's much bigger than we thought. Some of us thought it was just the planning aspect. Some of us might think it's just a technical, but no, you've got to respect people in there too. And so there's, the rules of Kanban or of Scrum or of SAFe, those are all like mechanical things. You could just do them. And, the engineering practices behind Agile are hard to learn. It's people learn to program in a very unique way to themselves. Usually not because someone taught them how to program it, because someone gave them programming problems and said, go figure it out. And they had enough of an aptitude to be able to succeed at that. That's my story. It wasn't until 20 years into my career, and I saw extreme programming, where it actually was a more, let's say, methodical or a method-oriented way of successfully building software. There were things that came before that, like write down all the requirements, get somebody to sign them in blood, do a design, get somebody to sign that in blood, write the code, okay, get it reviewed, test the code, release the code, right? That was the idea before. It didn't work. Iterative and incremental engineering practices of extreme programming work, as evidenced by all the people that learned it 20 years ago and keep doing it because it works. Now, then the hard part, this, the people thing, how do I get my
No, you got
finger
the
to
hand, you
point?
got your hand in the right place. Yeah.
Yeah, the people part, right? So now, if all you understand about, if you're an executive at a company and all you understand is somebody's telling you, hey, Agile means you can get something done in 2 weeks. It's like, great, let's do it. Okay, where's the whip? How big of a whip do we get with that? Because those lazy engineers and, it's not that, right? Okay, so I'm being kind of silly, but there's this idea of iterative planning, but then you also have to be willing to accept the bad news. And so one of the, I think, amazing things about Kent Beck's work in extreme programming was the Bill of Rights for developers and the Bill of Rights for the person that is the receiver of the development. In Kent's world, he simplified that role to customer. And the customer has rights, they can change their mind, okay? The developer has rights, they can say how much it costs, right? So there's others as well, but it was a humane relationship there that Kent was trying to promote. And it was really an underlying theme throughout Agile. And the people aspect, which is the first thing we talked about in Snowbird. And it's still talked about a lot, okay? But it's also kind of abused through the dogma of Agile practices. And you could say test-driven development is a dogmatic thing too, although for me, it isn't about a religion, it's about engineering and problem solving. So I can create a logic chain about why test-driven is important and why it's going to help you solve problems. Now, just telling people to do something in 2 weeks is a harder thing to do, right? If they don't have the skills to do iterative and incremental requirements breakdown and iterative and incremental engineering and that sort of thing, right? These are not skills that anybody really gets taught in a large scale way in universities today. And the professors are all busy trying to do AI and stuff like that. So they're not that interested in us real world people that have to, develop software to help the world work. So it's a different perspective. I've said enough now, I think.
Wow.
But those are the three.
That's just great. I think we answered several people's questions with that one slide. And well, folks, you heard it here first. Agile for the next 20 years. Agile's 3 halves. Agile's 3 halves. So this is a big takeaway. We're coming up to the close of the time box. I think we've got literally 3 minutes. So if you think you have a 3-minute question, let's field one.
Before we get the questions, I want to take a quick picture so that I want to make sure no one leaves. So if you guys can do me a quick, just turn on your video cameras real quick. And James, what symbol, James, here's a good one for you. Okay, you ready? What symbol represents, test-driven development to you? What symbol, if you had a symbol to put up for test-driven development, what would it look like? What would it look like?
No, that's not it. That's what you don't.
But show it to me with your hands. Show it with your hands. What symbol would represent test-driven okay, this right here? All right. Oh,
you must be crazy.
Must be crazy. Okay.
So again,
you must be crazy.
I need you guys to represent the symbol. Okay, test-driven development. What does it look like for you visually? Good job, Ray. Good job, Ray. Adrian, go ahead. Good job. I love that. Okay,
I'm going to take a screenshot, James. That's why we're doing this. We're going to take a screenshot.
Okay.
I would say this is the way.
Okay, I need some more video cameras on, guys. Some more video cameras. This is going to be. It's gonna be okay. Ready? Come on, and Andrea, let's go. Ready?
3,
5,
2,
4,
1.
2.